much do franchise quarterbacks go for these days?
About 50
About 50 million.
They've let him down.
Thank you. They've you know what? Let's start that narrative. That Trevor has been let down.
He has been.
If you think that Trevor Lawrence is a franchise quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars, then you have to pay him. And you should pay him as soon as possible.
I don't know if this dude is capable of winning a Super Bowl. I don't know if he's our franchise quarterback. I don't know.
Trevor Lawrence is the most hyped quarterback to emerge from college football in the last decade.
Do I think that he's done developing? No. Do I think he's achieved everything that he has been expected to achieve in the NFL? No. Do I think that he looks exactly the way that we expected him to look out of college? No. But I do think he is the franchise quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
And now he's on the cusp of his most pivotal season yet. In 2024, the pressure is on as he faces the toughest challenges of his career, with the need to prove he's gonna be worth every penny of his hefty new extension. And in today's video, we're gonna talk about why this year is a make or break for Lawrence, and if his performance will define his legacy and future in the NFL for the years to come. In his time as the Clemson quarterback, he went 34-2 and won a national championship game along the way, being named MVP in a phenomenal blowout win over Alabama in January of 2019. From that moment, most analysts agreed that Lawrence was destined to be a surefire #1 pick in the draft.
When you look at his ability and his ceiling, he does have a huge ceiling. This kid has everything that you look for in a quarterback. He's got a big arm, he's a great decision maker, he is accurate with the football, he's a great kid that supports his team, he leads his team, he's humble, he cares for people. I think he would be a great selection to lead a franchise because he will actually do that.
They believe that whichever team ended up fortunate enough to draft him would secure a true franchise quarterback for many years to come. And in April of 2021, the Jacksonville Jaguars were that franchise, selecting him first overall and making fans in Duval County dream of a bold new future with Lawrence and legendary college football head coach Urban Meyer. That didn't happen at all, though.
Saying that it was so bad, quote, "I'm surprised he lasted that long, to be honest with you. Told us from day one he was going to maximize our value, and I truly can't tell you one player that maximized their value on the Jags this year." That's how bad it was in Jacksonville with Urban Meyer and beyond. What a total, complete failure.
Lawrence endured an extremely rough debut season in Jacksonville, throwing more interceptions than touchdowns and ranking as the worst starter in the league in passer rating with a dismal 71.9. However, most fans correctly blame Meyer for this, and he was fired before the end of the year, giving Lawrence a real fresh start in 2022. It would prove to be a much better campaign for Lawrence and the Jaguars under new head coach Doug Pederson.
Already look better. Doug Pederson will make them better. The addition of Pederson is now amplified by the subtraction of the greatest fraud perpetrated ever.
On top of this, the front office also pushed the boat out to bring in a new wide receiver #1 in Christian Kirk. And the ex-Cardinal recorded more than 1,100 yards through the air, making Lawrence's job that much easier in his sophomore season. And I mean, look, with a new head coach and a new wide receiver, Trevor Lawrence truly thrived in the second half of that season. He threw 15 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions from week 9 onwards, as the Jags won 7 of their last 9, clinching the AFC South title and a playoff berth. In the wildcard round against the Chargers, Lawrence overcame a brutal first half in which he threw 4 interceptions to lead the Jaguars to a famous 31-30 comeback win as time expired. I mean, like, this truly just added more misery onto another long-suffering fan base in the Chargers too.
This kid threw 4 picks. Horrible picks. It wasn't like, no, like, damn, that was a heck of a play by the DB. I'm like, dude, he was just like hitting people in the chest. And then he just forgot everything. He just like rebooted and started from scratch.
The following week, though, wasn't the same, as Jackson fell pretty much predictably to the Chiefs, but Trevor Lawrence had absolutely broken through as one of the league's top quarterbacks and looked set to rule that division for at least the next few years. And look, I mean, they might have lost that game to the Chiefs, but at the end of the day, they truly did look like they were in that game from start to finish, and one different play could have made that game just completely different. Like, I mean, the Jags were actually pretty close to stealing that game in Arrowhead. Fast forward to the 2023 season, offseason now, Lawrence was given another major weapon in former Falcons receiver Calvin Ridley Jr., a former All-Pro receiver whom Atlanta were happy to move on as a result of his gambling suspension, which had seen him miss the entire 2022 season. And coming into this season, it was fair to say that a lot of people were hyped on Trevor Lawrence, even including myself. I bought some of his cards thinking he was going to have a breakout year and just be a possible MVP candidate this past season.
This team grows as Trevor Lawrence grows, and as much as he improves, this team improves. We saw him take a huge jump last season. I think we see him take another jump this season with the addition of Calvin Ridley playing wide receiver to go along with Christian Kirk and Zay Jones and Evan Ingram, who still remains unsigned on that franchise tag. But to me, this team reminds me a little bit of what the Colts were supposed to be before Andrew Luck retired.
Like, not only that, a lot of people thought that they were going to not only get a playoff berth, but also maybe make a little run in the playoffs if they got there. However, in his third season, honestly, more questions were raised about Lawrence than answered. And to be fair, at the beginning of this season, they looked good. The team was sitting pretty at 8-3 after week 11, following a hard-fought win over division rivals Houston, who themselves were putting together an impressive rebuild under their own exciting new quarterback, CJ Stroud. Like, I mean, it's crazy to say this, and I don't know if a lot of people are going to remember this, but at this point in the season, the Jaguars had a 99% chance of making it into the playoffs. I mean, they were sitting atop the AFC South at this time. But what followed next, nobody would see coming.
4 takeaways. They got 5 sacks in this game. Game is over. One of the most entertaining games of the season.
This team is tough to beat.
That run gets the first down, gets the Ravens over 200 rushing yards, and gets the Baltimore Ravens into the playoffs.
Jaguars are still in first. All 3 teams tied for first, same record.
Just 6 weeks later, after 5 losses out of 6, the Jags fell to 9-8 and missed the playoffs entirely.
Jaguars are the one team that I thought was most likely to win their division, period, end of statement. Mainly because we didn't expect the Colts or the Texans to be anything, and they both ended up being great.
Yeah.
And that's it. Jaguars done. Tough pill to swallow if you're a Jaguars fan, because you came into the season thinking we're going to be right back where we were last year.
I mean, all that young talent, the quarterback headed in the right direction. You know, you thought, wait, they got guys on the defensive side of the ball that's all arrow up. It's all going to come together. The Jaguars clearly are the best team in the AFC South. Just really fell apart towards the end of the season.
In a shocking turn of events, which almost mirrored the year before. And rightly so, a lot of this blame was put onto Lawrence, who in many ways kind of took some steps backwards last year. Like, I mean, down that stretch where they lost a ton of games, he honestly looked terrible in some of these games. The one that stands out the most to me is the Christmas Eve showing in Tampa Bay, where he threw 2 interceptions and had a passer rating of 64 as the Jags were swept aside by a distinctly average Buccaneers side. The final nail in the coffin, though, came in week 18 when the Titans, who had already been eliminated from playoff contention, beat the Jaguars. Like, Jaguars' season was over, having completed a legendary collapse and leading to a real crossroad in both the careers of Trevor Lawrence as well as the long-term future of this franchise. And as we go into the 2024 season, which is now Trevor Lawrence's 4th season in the NFL, he truly hasn't hit any of those high remarks many people thought that he would. And I mean, admittedly, the hype was always there around him, and for him to really get to that hype was going to be a challenge from the get-go. Like, I mean, coming out of college, this kid was expected to be the likes of like John Elway, Peyton Manning, or even Andrew Luck. That's what he was trying to live up to and just never got to. Now, I will say Trevor Lawrence's first year was a total write-off due to the coaching of Urban Meyer, if you even want to call it that, who clearly wasn't cut out for a coaching role in the NFL. But since then, he's guided the Jags to 2 9-8 seasons and thrown for just over 4,000 yards in each of these seasons with 46 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. And don't get me wrong, because I know what I'm about to say is about to piss some people off, and these are good numbers of a good quarterback, but are they good numbers of an elite quarterback that they want him to be? And I truly think the answer to that question is no. I don't really think he is elite. He'll win games, but he's not elite. So far this offseason, we've seen big quarterback contracts for Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, and Baker Mayfield, all earning more than $30 million a year, and in Goff's case, more than $50 million. The franchise will want to get this sorted sooner rather than later and avoid this being a major distraction going into the upcoming season, where the Jags will be looking to regain their AFC South crown from the Texans. And by the time you are watching this video, I truly don't know. Trevor Lawrence might already have gotten his contract extension and is getting paid that $50 million or even more over the next few seasons. But are they extending him because he's a franchise quarterback or because he looks like one? Like, I mean, I think it's fair to say this too. I think the Jags kind of have to tie down Lawrence and get him on a contract extension because they truly have not had a franchise quarterback since the days of like David Garrard or something like that. One quick thing I wanted to mention also is that if you guys have not, make sure to join my Discord where we are doing monthly giveaways. In June, I should be doing 2 autographed jersey giveaways, so make sure you join over there. And during the NFL season, we will have some huge fantasy leagues and weekly and season-long pick'ems for big cash prizes. And I mean, the best part about all of this is that it's free to join. So I highly recommend joining. We're trying to build a community over there, but let's hop right back into the video. The Jared Goff extension in particular, as well as the increase in salary cap this offseason, increases Lawrence's demands and shows us what the new normal is for quarterback salaries in 2024. Like, look, I think paying Trevor Lawrence is pretty inevitable here, and I think it's going to happen eventually, either before the season or after the season, or hell, maybe even during the season. But honestly, that might be setting this franchise up for failure in the future. Again, in 2023, Lawrence had a situation that more than half of the league's starting quarterbacks would have bitten your hand off for. Like, the dude had talent all around him, and Calvin Ridley, he was given an elite wideout and wasn't quite able to make that work out. Ridley just scraped 1,000 yards on the year, but never quite hit the heights that he did in Atlanta during his time in Florida. As for the running game, Lawrence was given Travis Etienne, a first-round pick who has recorded back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons on the ground, as well as providing a reliable passing option for Lawrence out of the backfield. Plus, Lawrence enjoyed the company of tight end Evan Ingram, a 2-time Pro Bowler who impressed even in some mediocre, at best, New York Giants offenses. In Ingram, the Jags have one of the league's best players at the position. Yet another example of the firepower that Lawrence had at his disposal last year, and the Jags just didn't make the most of it. So I mean, it's not as if Lawrence hasn't had a supporting cast in the last 2 years. The Jags have put key offensive pieces around him and been unable to get elite production out of their QB1. And remember, this has been all while Trevor Lawrence has been on a rookie contract, which I think at the most is like a $10 million cap hit. If the dude gets a huge extension, then I don't even know if they're going to be able to bring in any more talent or even try to recruit people to come play there just because of the money. I mean, hell, Calvin Ridley himself opted to even move on, signing for a divisional rival in the Tennessee Titans instead. The Jags did offer Ridley a contract, but for whatever reason, he still decided to move on, stating that there's a lot of things that weren't working out for me when talking to the Jaguars. The Jags' biggest addition at receiver this year was former Bills wideout Gabe Davis on a $39 million contract, 3-year deal. Davis was a solid performer in Buffalo who spent his time there as mostly a wide receiver 2 to Stephon Diggs, providing Josh Allen with a solid number 2 option in the passing game. Now, whether Davis is treated as a true number 1 wide receiver remains to be seen, but it looks as though the Jags are going to find out one way or another, with the next option on the depth chart being Christian Kirk. And look, I'm gonna be pretty frank with this, but Christian Kirk is a player the Jags overpaid for 2 years ago. Like, as desperate teams often do to kick off a rebuild, he hasn't been a disaster for the Jaguars by any means, but less than 1,800 yards in 2 seasons is not the level of production you'd hope for an $18 million a year wide receiver. However, the most interesting thing or interesting move I think that the Jaguars have done at any position this offseason has been at the quarterback position. Jacksonville traded a 6th-round pick to the New England Patriots for Mac Jones, a man who was drafted in the 2021 first round alongside Lawrence, but whose career has followed a very different path. Jones's first season in New England was a success, and he gained Rookie of the Year votes along the way, but the 2 seasons since have been anything but that. Jones was benched for the last 6 games of 2023 after some terrible performances, and the Patriots have understandably chosen to move on from him and pick up Drake May with the 3rd overall pick in the 2024 draft. And look, we all know that the Patriots do need a reset right now, and I think it's fair to ask the same question, does Mac Jones also need that reset? And it's kind of funny to see these guys on the same roster because I think their narratives couldn't be more unsimilar than these 2 guys. Like, I mean, one of these guys is about to pick up a massive contract and is probably going to be the face of this franchise. The other's NFL career is hanging on by a thread and possibly after this season may never play another snap in the NFL. NFL. And this is the craziest part though. If you go between these two and you compare the stats between them, they're not that different. Like some of these stats I'm about to read you, it's kind of crazy that they're both so parallel to each other. Jones has had a slightly higher winning percentage as a starter with 43% to 40%. Lawrence has a lead on passing yards per game and touchdowns, but when it comes down to passer rating, Jones has an extremely narrow lead of 85.8 to Lawrence's 85. Like for some reason this doesn't sound right, but the Jags have clearly made this trade for a reason. And I think it's safe to say that they might have brought him in to maybe light a fire under Lawrence's ass to maybe just make sure that he is working, because in his time in Duval County, he really hasn't had a challenger for the quarterback role. Like I think his toughest competition was a 30-year-old CJ Beathard, who I mean has been just a long time backup in the NFL. Where we look at Jones, who has proven himself, I mean briefly, but as a starting caliber NFL quarterback, which he demonstrated throughout that impressive first year in New England, which now feels so long ago. Jones is almost certainly on his last chance here. And it's fair to say that he's not a serious contender to start in week 1. But make no mistake, as I said before, I do think that this trade kind of does, you know, put a little pressure on Lawrence in this season. Like, I mean, this time last year, it would have been crazy to think Lawrence being benched, but I mean, after the Jaguars' derailed season last year, would it really be that crazy if they sat him and maybe gave Mac Jones a shot? If the 2024 season starts out how the previous one ended, it's definitely a conversation that Doug Pederson and his coaching staff might need to have. And look, the early schedule isn't kind to them either, with all 4 of their first games coming against teams that had winning records last year. The Dolphins, the Browns, the Bills, the new kings of the division, CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans. And speaking of the Texans, the rise of them has been another problem for Lawrence and the rest of the franchise to deal with. Like, I mean, just 2 years ago, the Texans were pretty much the little brother that everybody in the NFL would go and beat up on, and really posed no threat to the division at all. Now, however, the Texans look like one of the football's very best teams, having made last season's divisional round and looking well placed to do even better next season. Last year, the Texans not only picked up CJ Stroud with the 2nd pick, but they traded up to select Will Anderson Jr. with the number 3 pick in an aggressive move that paid off immediately. As we all know, Stroud and Anderson both won their respective Rookie of the Year awards, and the Texans completed their rebuild in record time, becoming one of the league's most exciting and fun teams to watch along the way. They've added big names on defense like Alshire and Danielle Hunter, as well as making their own blockbuster trade for Stephon Diggs, creating an elite wide receiver room alongside Tank Dell and Nico Collins, both of whom impressed when healthy last year. And look, whether they admit it or not, fans of the Jags watching the Texans rebuild the way they have probably makes them really jealous. It makes me really jealous as a Saints fan, and we've been successful. Like, I mean, hell, in just 12 short months, the Texans have gone from being the little brother that got beat up on to now they are the reigning champions and the favorites to win the AFC South, and the Jags are nowhere to be seen. Like, I mean, this is truly not just Trevor Lawrence's fault, but now they're playing catch up and he needs to step up if they want to make it back to the playoffs. And undoubtedly, they have some massive pressure, not only on Lawrence, but as a team as well. And with all that being said, it's clear that Trevor Lawrence needs to have a breakout season in 2024. Now, whether he gets paid or not before the start of the season, he absolutely has to show fans everywhere, and especially in Jacksonville, that he is one of those elite game-changing quarterbacks that can take a team to a Lombardi trophy. And there have been flashes of magic over these 3 years in the league, and his highlight reel shows a confident, comfortable passer who is capable of making all kinds of throws. The biggest issue has been putting it all together for a full 17 games, something he has yet to do in the pros so far. The second half against the Los Angeles Chargers on January 14, 2023 really looked like that coming-of-age moment for him, as he looked every bit the franchise quarterback that he was promised to be. Now, whether he lives up to the title of the prince that is promised really remains to be seen, but the 2024 season is undoubtedly the biggest one yet, especially if Mac Jones is going to be breathing down his neck. If he doesn't perform in 2024 and the Jaguars miss the playoffs again, we'll really have to start asking questions about this guy and whether or not the Jags will make a big mistake by landing a big money contract on his desk in the offseason. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you think Trevor Lawrence is truly an elite quarterback? Is he going to even survive in the NFL, or what should the Jaguars do next? Truly, for me, I don't really think he's that great, and I don't think that he should get like that Jared Goff number, but that's kind of where the market's at now. So they're probably going to have to pay him somewhere around that number, but I don't think it's a good investment just based off of all the stats and things that I've presented. But again, it's so hard to find just a good quarterback in the NFL that's probably why they're going to lock him up. But let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one.